friends. My name is Jaime. You may have seen some videos during quarantine, but I work for the MidPointe Library System. I'm one of the library specialists there. So a lot of times you'll see me at different branches, but one of my favorite things is art, and I would love to show you guys how to do a doodled landscape. Now, a doodled landscape is just going to be something real simple. Don't get stressed out about it. Don't get upset if yours doesn't look like mine, because that's not the point. Each time you practice or come up with your own pieces of artwork, that's just some time for you to have for yourself and to enjoy and just have fun. Like, if you don't have fun with this, then it's just not going to be something you'll try. So please try at least once, and you might surprise yourself. And today, you'll see a supply list, probably in the description of this video, but you may see that I'm holding a pen, a ballpoint pen. Ignore that. You will actually have a pencil and an eraser to draw your piece originally, because once you get that pencil line down, we'll actually be going over top of it with a marker or a Sharpie. Just make sure it's permanent. And you really wouldn't even have to do black if you didn't want to. But for now, I'm going to use a pen so that it will show up the best. But to start off, when you are creating your own piece, you'll kind of figure out how you want to work. Obviously, with this video, you can follow along and do exactly what I'm doing, but feel free to even adjust the drawing as we go. So I'm going to personally start down at the bottom right of the image, and we'll just do two little round hills. And I'm going to start off on the far right, little up from the bottom, and just start some of that semicircle. So we're coming down and move back up and all the way down to the bottom of your page. So you'll just have this almost heart shape on the right corner. And that gives us two little mounds of earth, because since this is a landscape, we're going to do kind of a mountainous image with a couple of trees. So just to go ahead and get your trees in, we'll start on this first mound, and you'll move up and across, and you'll be creating almost a Y shape. And remember, since you're doing pencil, you can erase as you go, and especially if you may not like the drawing that you're doing, then you're going to be able to erase it than me doing pen. But you'll do kind of a triangle shape at the top, and then finish off down from the bottom at the top of that mound. You'll do a parallel line to create the trunk of that tree and swerve out to the right so that you have two big branches coming off of your trunk. And normally with trees, your trunk is going to be a lot thicker than your branch. So if you were to do more branches, just keep in mind that it shouldn't be as thick as the trunk. But we'll start with kind of this Y shape. And then let's go ahead and do the trunk of the other tree, which is going to be a little further back. So it's going to be smaller. And some of it's going to cut off on the right. I feel like sometimes when you don't center stuff, it kind of adds a little more interest. So we'll do kind of the same idea where it goes up straight for a little while and then goes off to the left in almost a Y shape. And we'll just do something a little different where we'll kind of stop that and make it a tiny branch, because sometimes they have a little dead spot in them. And then we'll do another triangle shape to create another branch. another triangle shape because we're going to do three, almost like three little fingers. And then come back down and let it just run off the edge of the paper. Enough that you can see that there's another side to the tree, but let it go off the page. So then, let's go ahead and kind of add some of your leaves to the tree. Now, some of you may see like little kid drawings will be like kind of a cloud with a trunk that just goes straight. But we want to keep that kind of cloud idea, but let's dress it up a little bit because each tree has a little kind of different section of leaves. So we'll start from the top left and do like your cloud shapes, or what you could also call scalloped edges. And just make it go off the corner so that you have a good shape there that's connected to your left branch of the larger tree. So then we of course have to do the other side. So do more scalloped edges kind of behind what you've already designed and have it go off to the right side. Now on here, I'm just going to do parallel lines to do more scalloped edges, just to give a little different look. To add more leaves to the tree. And this kind of gives you more space to add some extra stuff that I'll show you here in a second. And then let's go ahead and do kind of, because obviously there's more branches potentially on this tree and more leaves. So we'll go ahead and do more scalloped edges behind the tree. And this is where you can kind of do some different shapes. They don't have to be nearly as big as the original. And it's okay for it to go behind that other tree. And then we'll go ahead and do the same type of idea with the scallops for this tinier tree. And do it even behind what we just drew. And I'm going to go back to that big tree, and I'm going to do the same thing where I did parallel lines to those scalloped edges, just to make this tree stand out from the other one. And also don't worry about if your drawing starts looking like it's pretty flat, because when we start outlining with our marker, you can always make lines thicker to make stuff stand out. But we'll address the bottom of the image again. So we kind of want another piece of earth on the left side in the bottom corner, but I don't want to just make it flat, because we already have a very circular feeling to the piece. So I like to kind of use similar shapes again. So we'll do another little semicircle to create another little hill on the left side. But I also want kind of a mountain to break up the background. So since we're very heavy on the right side, I'm going to do a rounded off mountain about in the middle of the paper. And it's going to start from the left, slowly go up, and then slowly come back down and behind the tree until it hits the other far right hill. And of course it can't be a lonely mountain, so we need to do another one. But it'll be a little smaller this time, and just go up until you touch the tree on the far right, the tiny one. And I always love incorporating in doodles the sun. So we'll add a sun peeking through between those two mountains. And it's really just a semicircle. You don't see a whole lot of it. But to add a little more pizzazz, because of course we have all of this space in there, let's do some rays to the sun. So the lines that are closest to the sun are going to be closer together, but it's going to radiate out. So they're going to split apart even further. So to explain that, we'll just go straight out with our first line. Then we'll stay pretty close, but as we go out, we'll spread it further. And of course, since we have some sky that we don't see the sun in, you just continue some of that kind of striping. Do it on here, just continue all the way across. And to finish that off. Okay. So I may have gone too fast for some of you, but you are more than welcome to rewind some of this and kind of go back if I went too fast. But you have a basic image already. You already know kind of where it's going. You know there's two trees and land, and we also have the sky. So you have a foreground, a midground, and the background is your sun. And I love in doodling to add a lot of texture. So you can add more line work. Now you don't have to get real crazy with your textures. You can keep them very simple and just in a way that is still relaxing to you. You don't need to stress out about the texture. And also keep in mind, depending on how big your piece is, because like right now we're just on copy paper, so the ink can maybe be a little heavy duty for something like this. Of course, you'll potentially have maybe watercolor paper or Bristol paper. They're a lot denser in the paper family and heavier, so they can handle either ink or watercolor paint or even markers. But something like this, you probably would end up coloring with colored pencil or crayon and sort of dry materials. But for now, since it's kind of small, because this is only about a half of an 8.5 by 11 right now, you probably don't want to have really tiny details because a Sharpie is going to kind of fill in some of those tiny details as you go. Now, if we had something pretty big, like the full 8.5 by 11, you might be able to do more tiny details. Because the more that this fills in, the more blackness you're going to have and less spots to actually fill in. So, as you go, we can, let's go back to these little hills where the trees are sitting on. And you can do something as simple as polka dots. Just do little circles. And I'm kind of staggering them so that they don't look like a perfect line of polka dots, but it still creates a pattern. Now, anyone who's not real familiar with pattern, it really is just a repetition of shapes that work together as a unit. So it creates a pattern. And if you're really stuck on patterns, don't feel bad about looking up on Google or on your phone and type in patterns. And it'll give you more ideas on what to attempt to draw. And you can even type in simple patterns, and that should give you more options for just simple designs, just like circles, or you'll see a lot of lines. And since this is a landscape piece, I always like mixing in some of the almost farmland shapes that happen when you're looking at a farmland aerially. Sometimes the way the plants are kind of has this almost beach ball effect, so stripes that follow some of the shape can really change up a doodle or a drawing and kind of forces your eye to see it as a different shape. Or it gives it more of a three-dimensional look too. And maybe on this back one, we could do little triangles, which whenever I do little triangles, it makes me think of pine trees in the back. And then on this other little mountain, and I try to change up the pattern, especially if it's a whole different mountain or different object within the art piece. And then I always like to add a little different patterns in the rays of the sun too. And since we've already used a lot of circular patterns, it's nice to mix in some of just the straight lines in the pattern. But you can reuse some of your patterns, like I'm reusing the polka dots, but try to do different patterns or maybe no patterns in certain areas. It will draw your eye to have different things. But you can, and as you can see, you can get kind of crazy. You can just keep adding pattern upon pattern. And I'll kind of pause for a second, because really you can keep adding pattern with just the marker. So of course, pretend this is, of course, pencil. And we wanted to go ahead and start making solid lines that we want to keep before we try to colorize it. So you're pretty much creating your own coloring page. With the Sharpie marker, this is where you can draw thicker lines than your pencil is drawing. And of course, some people may get a little frustrated that it's too thick. So you could use a really fine, like a ultra fine point Sharpie, but I think this is fun to have it kind of be thick already, and then you can always thicken it as you go. Because you'll kind of notice as you're retracing your lines, maybe what lines you would prefer to keep or what you want to pop out. So you can see how I'm making this line on the large tree a lot thicker. And it could just be one side. I'm going to make this little mound of earth on the bottom right a little heavier just to make it pop. Even though it is in the foreground, sometimes we have to, as an artist, kind of make it a little more dominant. And the way you can do that is by changing your line thickness. Because the more bold a line is, the more dominant it's going to become in your piece. And you would slowly just kind of take your time. Don't feel like you have to finish this in one setting. You could always stop and take a breather, especially if it gets frustrating. Please take a breather. I don't want it to be stressful for you. But you really go all over, and you can even do the patterns. And of course you have the leaves up here and the trees, which we already started leaving some space within these scalloped edges, so you could actually have some different patterns. And it doesn't have to follow the shape. Just do some fun, maybe straight lines within it, and then maybe change it up so that the lines have some parallel or perpendicular lines going on, where some are touching, some are running into each other. It just changes up the space. Plus it gives you more areas to potentially color different colors or do a rainbow effect, whatever you want. So the more you break up these, the more space you have to change up your colors or just to give more texture to your piece. Because we really could just do, and I have had some people just do the outlines of everything, not even mess with the pattern because they didn't really want to add texture. And that's fine too. You don't have to follow me exactly. You may have a better idea before you finish your piece. But you'll just keep going, and eventually you'll have something similar to this, where everything has the marker, and you'll continue filling in your pattern, and at some point you'll have it completely filled out to your liking. And like this is actually on watercolor paper, and here is your copy paper. You can kind of see already just the appearance of it is a little different. The sound of the watercolor paper is different for sure. And with something like this, you would be able to use more wet materials on. So you can see this has already been painted a little bit with watercolor. On something like the copy paper, which you may have more readily at home, I would say colored pencil, crayon to colorize it. Something that's just watercolor, you could end up with something like this at the very end. And you pretty much are creating your what I said before, coloring page. You can do a ton of these. Maybe even your kids could help color them. Or maybe you just want to use something that is unfamiliar to you, like maybe you haven't colored with crayons before. But when you are coming up with your own, which I highly encourage you, you can always go to pexels.com and type in landscape and just look through. Maybe something will speak to you in the images, and think along these lines. Keep them simple. Just see how the tree was kind of a big Y. This was almost a tinier W. There's circles. Just keep some of these images very simple. You don't have to do the huge amounts of detail that some of these have, but something like this image, you could get the idea of at least the mountains in the background. And Pexels is really good for giving you different reference photos to work with. And even these trees in this image, you could really just do triangles. You don't have to do every little piece on them. But even the mountains in the background look like triangles. So just break down your image into a doodle. And the clouds in the background could be very similar to what we did here for the leaves on these trees. Do that in the sky. Just try different things. You don't have to just go off and draw whatever you're thinking in your head. Because sometimes when we have images to go off of, that makes us more comfortable. But I'm glad you guys joined with me today and tried to learn how to doodle a landscape. I really hope you try this one out and create more for yourself. and enjoy experimenting and creating artwork. And I appreciate you sitting here and taking the time to watch. So thank you so much from the MidPointe Library, and we hope you have a great, awesome, artistic, creative day. Thank you. Bye.